Okay, good evening, everyone. It's great to see you all. Sorry I missed you all last week. I was at a wedding in Chicago, and they couldn't pick a different night besides Wednesday. So glad to see you back. So today we're going to be speaking about two of our favorite people in our life, Abraham and Sarah. And we're going to connect the story of Abraham and Sarah with our personal lives. You know, famous question, does Judaism have to be natural? Most steps that we take in Judaism eventually become second nature. When you stick with a new commitment, requires focus and grit. This will be your comfort zone. But for many of us, it doesn't seem easy. And therefore, all the time we struggle. And we have to constantly have mindfulness. Well, is there something wrong with us that we have such a hard time sticking to Judaism? It's a constant struggle. Does it indicate that there's something wrong with our commitment to God? When we look at our relationships in life, we see that many of them have struggle and drama. And some of them are more calm and organized. Imagine the following scenario. You're at a wedding for a family member, and you meet your sister that you have not spoken to from before the pandemic. And you just continue talking from where you left off. Well, how's your daughter doing in high school? Or imagine another scenario. You're on a business trip and you have not called your wife for about a week already. After a week, you pick up the phone and then you ask her, well, I forgot to ask you, how was that dinner on Sunday night? Is there a difference between the relationship of husband-wife and brother-sister? We all understand that husband-wife relationships need work. Brother-sister, brother to brother, sister to sister does not require much work. But without work, you could stay married. But it might not be a happy marriage, or it might not end. It might lead to divorce. Well, if marriage needs so much work and emotional work, what is so great about marriage? If it constantly needs work, what's so special about it? Why is there closeness of brother-sister not enough? Why is the brother-sister or sister-to-sister relationship much more consistent? Today, we're going to speak how these relationships connect with our day-to-day life and our service to God. Why does a calm relationship not satisfy us? Is there something special about having struggles to continue our life and our commandments to God? From the situation of comfort without any effort, why is everything such a struggle? Not only in our service to God, but in our day-to-day lives, it's a constant struggle. We feel like we're constantly fighting a battle. In this week's Torah portion, we see the first revelation of God to Abraham. He was called Avram, and later on, his name was called Avraham. God told him, leave your land, your birth house, the place you were born, and leave your parents' home. And he was already 75 years old. God told him to leave the land. He did not tell him exactly where to go, but he went to Canaan. He went to Canaan, which is today the land of Israel, and he brought a sacrifice to God. And he spread monotheism to everyone around him. But it did not last long. He was forced to leave Egypt because he was forced to leave Canaan because there was a hunger. And then he went to the land of Egypt because Egypt had the Nile River where there was no hunger and the river watered the field. But you know that in Egypt, you're living with immoral people. People that are not very moral. So, considering the danger that there is in Egypt, Avram realized that his wife was beautiful. His wife Sarah was beautiful. And in Egypt, everyone was ugly. So Avram said, I must do something. If I say I'm her husband, they're going to kill me. What should I do? So he told his wife, say I'm your brother. So they'll take you, and then when they find out that I'm your wife, I'm your husband, they will give me gifts and reward me on your behalf. But this begs a very strong question. Such a character like Avram Avinu, how could he put his wife in danger? Why didn't he do everything in his power to save her? Isn't it weird that he focused on the gifts that he's going to receive? And that's why he told her to say that he's her brother? Well, the Abarbanel, which lived in Portugal from the year 1437 to 1508, great commentary on the Torah, he explains, Abraham felt, as he says, actually, I makes the question even stronger, that such a great man like Avram would endanger his wife. Wouldn't it be better that he should get killed and at least save his wife, which actually would be counterproductive because if he was killed, they would take his wife anyway. But there's something much deeper to this story than we could see with our naked eye. Reb Pinchas Horowitz, which is known as the Rogatchover, great Torah scholar, he explains as follows. If he would say it's his wife, they're going to kill her and take her. If he's going to say it's his sister, they're going to take her anyway, but at least they'll give him gifts. In other words, Abraham and Sarah were forced to go into a lion's cage, to go into Egypt, which is the only place there was food. But the circumstances were not too good. There's also a legal element here. As Rabbi Yosef Rosen, the Rogatchover, explains, Abraham told Sarah, dissolve our marriage. we're sort of now at this point divorced. Now that we're divorced, anyone could take you and it's not a sin. Interesting point. So now, it used to be actually years ago, when men would go out to the battle, they would divorce their wife in case they went missing and the wife didn't know if their husband died or not. And if he didn't, she would need a legal divorce from him. So they would divorce their wives, and if everything worked fine and they came back, they would remarry. So Abraham took steps to try to save everyone. But the Zohar adds a very powerful statement to this entire story. Abraham knew that nothing bad is going to happen to his wife. He knew it. He knew that nothing's going to happen to her. He knew that God always rested over her. Abraham felt that God will definitely protect Sarah. So instead of living with fear, he was confident that if Hashem put them in this situation, that there's a hunger and they have to go into Egypt, everything's going to turn out fine. And he knew that his wife is in a higher level than he actually is. And if he says he's her husband, he actually might get killed. But if he says that he's her brother, they will take her and they won't do anything with her. They will give her gifts and return her, as the end of the story actually was. But all these explanations sound very fine and dandy. But as we know, the Torah is not just a book of stories. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from the life of Abraham and Sarah that's not written clearly in the Torah. The lesson. And by the way, there's a lot of things that happened to Abraham and Sarah that are not mentioned in the Torah. It just mentions certain aspects of their life. But the fact that we did bring the story that they went to Egypt and he had to put her in a box and hide her and eventually say he's her brother and all this means there's a lesson that we could learn from this story. But we all know it's very hard for us to emulate exactly what Abraham did. So what is the lesson we could take from the story of Abraham and Sarah? Let's try to understand the powerful lesson that we could learn from Abraham and Sarah going into Egypt. If we want to explain the meaning of the story, we have to explain that the Torah is not just writing a diary of two people, Abraham and Sarah, which were the first that took the steps of the beginning of the Jewish nation. They dedicated their life to God. When they came to Egypt, they were sure that God has a spiritual mission for them. Many commentaries point out that the end result of their trip to Egypt happened to the Jewish people throughout the history. We go into an immoral place, we engage with it, and we go out with wealth. Abraham and Sarah pioneered the Jewish approach to serving God. They went from such a high spiritual place and they went down to such a physical location. They went from very high to very low. And instead of taking a defensive posture, They looked at the situation that it's a necessary step to grow in their mission. They trusted in God. Not only is going to protect them, but there's also a mission. When they looked at it, when they looked at the mission in this light, the first Jewish couple set a pattern of what's going to be repeated throughout the Jewish history. There's different versions.
Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
So this is all before the revelation at Sinai, before the laws of marriage, and before whatever was, what Jewish marriage should be. I'm just curious. You said something just made me wonder, because you were saying that they were a model, but this was before like what marriage should be as given at Sinai. And I'm wondering if Sarah would be treated any differently had it happened beforehand. The way she was in the tent and the way he spoke with her might have been a different relationship after Sinai, if you can go forward or back in time. So
right, but the thing is that Abraham kept the entire Torah even before God gave it. So he kept all the laws of marriage and everything that was required. We're just talking about a situation where if she goes into Egypt and there's corrupt people there and she's beautiful, they'll kill him and take her. Well, they don't care about the laws of marriage in Egypt. The Egyptians are not following it. So that was Abraham's concern. Nothing to do with before or after the Torah was given. So he did keep all the laws of proper marriage, and that's why there's an opinion, like I mentioned, that he maybe divorced her in order that if something happens to her, it's not as bad as if she would be married. Now, the end result of Abraham and Sarah was they came into the darkness of Egypt, the most corrupt place in the world, and they actually came out fine with an enormous amount of wealth, spiritual wealth and physical wealth. Abraham became one of the wealthiest people in the world. This repeats itself in our exile in all times. This gives us the framework to understand the purpose of exile. We must search for the light and the purpose in this darkness. We have to filter through the darkness and find a purpose to be successful and to uplift the negativity in our lives. But it's a very tall order. We have to go into the dirt, but you must stay clean. This is a tough mission. The Zohar says that Abraham and Sarah were the first ones to do this mission. This represents the two concepts and the two aspects of our life. If you ever heard of the statement, there is the body and the soul. Abraham represents soul, Sarah represents body. The Zohar says that Abraham was the keeper of the soul. It's compared to the soul that stays in heaven, separated from the world. The soul is not interested in being attracted to the world. The soul only wants to connect with God. He wants to be separated from the world. The soul wants to stay separated. The soul never forgets what's right and what's wrong. Sarah, on the contrary, represents the body, spiritual growth that you must have through dealing with the world and look for the good that's inside the world. This will bring the soul, the body brings the soul into the physical world and tries to work with it. The body serves God. The body serves God, but does not remove itself from the physical world, but it brings the soul with it. Of course, Abraham and Sarah went together to Egypt. And this is the marriage of the soul and the body. It gives us strength every day to overcome our challenges. There's a choice you could have to put the emphasis on the soul or the body. And the Rebbe explains there could be two different focuses. One focus is the soul. Loving Hashem. Like a child that loves his parents. He's engaging in spiritual concepts. Prayer, Torah study. You might shelter yourself from the outside. That might be the service of the soul. You're separated from the physical. This is sort of the love of a parent to a child, or the love that siblings have to each other. There isn't necessarily, it's a natural love. You love your brother and your sister, and your parents love you, and you love your children. This is the soul. It's normal. It's natural. The second approach is completely different. It's your relationship with God on the terms of the body. You don't naturally love godliness. The soul tries to protect the body. But the body has to find and search for godliness. We live in a world that there's no way to hide, that there's immorality in this entire world. You have to face the world and to bring godliness there, because there's no place in the world that the body could want to run away from. It's everywhere. The body must be active to come into the physical and to find a way to serve God. This is called uplifting the sparks, which means God is not only in the shul and in the yeshiva, but you go into the ugly world and you find ways to have religious growth. The latter approach is a constant struggle. When you close yourself off from the spirituality, from the physical world, Judaism is very comfortable. Just lock the door of your house, study and pray all day. Don't let anyone in to disturb you. That's a very peaceful life, and there will be no distractions. But then the soul could have stayed in heaven. What does it have to come down here for? But the ultimate goal is to uplift the body and the world around us. We must go into the world. This is a tough job. It's not easy. This is similar to the relationship of husband and wife. They didn't grow up in the same house. They were raised in different environments. It's a miracle that they live under the same roof. In order for them to have a relationship, they must overcome their natural differences. If you don't work on it, it will not last. Nature is against, and nature is not even on their side. So husband and wife relationship requires a lot of effort. And the Rebbe explains that the love of brother and sister or any siblings is a natural love. And it can't get stronger or weaker. Maybe a little stronger or a little weaker, but it's pretty much natural. This is the love of the soul to God. It's natural. There's no passion. Because husband and wife are not naturally close to each other. Therefore, they have to work on their relationship. The love of the body to God is much more passionate than the love of the soul. The Rebbe explains that the love to God happens when you purify the body. You break yourself. You don't want to put on the tefillin, you put it on anyway. You don't want to keep kosher and you keep it anyway. You don't want to keep Shabbat and you keep it anyway. You have to redirect your strength that you have from the body towards holiness. You have to realize that it's not natural. You have to go into the world and engage with the world and take out the good that's inside it. And the Alter Rebbe goes so far in the Tanya and explains, this is the ultimate goal of the creation of the world, that to uplift the physical to spirituality, and that's the purpose of everything, and that's the purpose why we were created. You have a struggle, God's smiling. And God is gaining so much pleasure that you overcame the struggle. If the goal is to maintain the soul's natural love to Hashem, he could have stayed in heaven. He could have sent only the soul down here, which does not lack anything. But Hashem made it clear that the goal is to engage with the world and to bring the good from the world and uplift it. So when you have that tough client or that nasty client or those nasty people around you, the goal is to work with them and uplift them and change them if you could. Now we understand. Back to the beginning of the class. Now we have a beautiful understanding of what's going on. 12:8. According to the Kabbalah, Sarah and Abraham is body and soul. Going into Egypt is like we have in every exile. There's two approaches. The approach of the sibling approach and the approach of husband and wife. If we look at Abraham and Sarah's strategy to go into Egypt, we see the direction they took. If they would have chosen only the direction of soul, Abraham would have never let Sarah, the body, go into Egypt. The neshama insisted to light up the body. How much it's possible. No good could come out from just the soul itself. Abraham was ready to take a calculated risk. Abraham was ready to put Sarah in Egypt against his comfort zone because he knew that there's a lot to gain. And only the body, which is Sarah, could accomplish this. It's written in 12a, a fascinating statement. Your blessings of wealth come through your wife. When your wife is happy, you will be wealthy. And we learn this in the Zohar from the story with Abraham and Sarah. If Sarah was empowered with the unique mission to change the world, she definitely got the strength for it. We explained from the Zohar that Abraham was sure that nothing bad will happen to Sarah. He knew for sure that she will stay connected with the soul. By us, we're sure that the soul could rely on the body to accomplish its mission. When you come into the world to take care of business, rely that the soul is going to help you. And Avraham knew that Sarah is going to be perfectly fine. As the Rebbe explains, that Sarah came into Egypt with the purpose to transform her connection with God. There is no risk that she will be drawn to holiness. There is no risk that she might be drawn to the Egypt way of life. Abraham was sure that she's going to end off perfect. What matters the most, and here comes our punchline from today's lesson. What matters the most is that when you come in, it's your mindset. When you come into the world, to maintain the values. When you come into the world with a mindset, you must stick to your values. You must come into the world with a clear purpose. When you come into Egypt, she does not see the world the way the Egyptians see the world. She does not see the nonsense that's going on in Egypt. She doesn't see the nonsense as an end to itself, but only for spiritual purposes. Abraham was confident that Sarah is going to be perfectly fine when he came into Mitzrayim. And he also got the wealth from Egypt. Through us understanding the story of Sarah, it gives us a new perspective on our religious struggles and our human relations. There's a downside to a relationship between siblings because it's comfortable and it's reliable. Therefore, you don't stay in your mom's house your whole life because there's no growth. Even though it's close, but it's missing the real closeness. Your mother loves you in every single situation. You do not have to earn it. You can only find the deepest fulfillment in an earned relationship. All the effort that you put, all the strong effort you put into the relationship, you're leaving your comfort zone. Because you could feel how close you are. You feel the closeness because you worked on it. When two people are in a fight and they work on being closer, it's the strongest relationship possible. Our relationship with God works exactly the same way. The body comes into the world and stays close to God. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we're interested in bad. And we need a lot of discipline to stay on track. But the very fact that it doesn't come easy makes our commitment to God so much more meaningful because we work on it. To make a committed relationship with Hashem does not have to be natural. And this is exactly why it's exciting and passionate. If it was easy, it would be boring. God does not want that our connection with him should be boring. He wanted that Sarah should come into Egypt and transform it. He wants us to go into the physical world and change. The goal is for us to turn the roadblocks that stand in our way into fuel that brings us closer to God than ever before. Make the roadblock into gasoline, so to speak. God did not send us into this world because he's looking for a sibling. God is looking for a spouse. He's the husband, we're the wife, and we constantly work hard on this relationship with Hashem. And every time we do a mitzvah, we're making Hashem smile. Even the smallest mitzvah makes Hashem smile and happy. So next time you have a struggle, realize that it's strengthening your relationship with Hashem. If it was easy, the relationship would not have fire. The weaker the relationship, the stronger the fire. The more struggles you have, the stronger the stronger the struggles are, the stronger the relationship will be. Any questions? Any questions? No questions. Okay. No more questions, Steve?
I just want to follow up on what I asked you before, and I've known that you've said this before about how pre Mount Sinai that the people knew about the Torah. That's just a fascinating.
Right. So they had a divine inspiration. So they had this conversation with God, and he gave them inspiration of.
But the so the Torah.
You think about it, Steve. I mean, Adam was a prophet. Cain was a prophet. He spoke to God. Adam, Noah, and Abraham, all these people were such holy people. Even Adam, which sinned, he was created with God's hands. You're talking about very high-leveled people. Abraham spoke to God. Isaac, Jacob, they've had to keep the Torah from the beginning. God made sure that they knew about it. He didn't want them to miss out, and then they would pass on without have kept the Torah.
So from that point, before the Torah was revealed at Sinai, and all those years in between, is there any did God make any changes along the way, or that Torah was the Torah?
I mean, that's an interesting point. Absolutely not. I mean, he didn't make any changes. And it's written in the Zohar, an interesting statement, that the Torah was written, meaning God already wrote it 2,000 years before he created the world. Whatever that meaning has, because, God created the world and there's no Torah, there's no world before. So what is 2,000 years if there's no time? But it basically means that it's even higher than the world. And he used the Torah as the blueprint to create the world. so the Torah matches to the world. So you can keep the Torah and keep the world at the same time.
It's just a fascinating concept, then.
Yeah.
So
you can't, if someone says, oh, I have to work on Shabbos, I can't keep the Torah, or else I'm going to be poor. God would never put you in such a position because he wrote the Torah and then created the world.
But everything that happened that's described in the Torah, then it is almost preordained that the events would work themselves out the way they had, even though we had to live through them.
Right.
But
yeah, it's true. So in other words, if God told Abraham that the Jewish people are going to be slaves in Egypt for 2,000 years, for 410 years and ended up being 210, whatever, it would be impossible not to happen because it says in the Torah, God told Abraham he's going to do it. But it does say that when Hashem says he's going to do something bad, he could change it. If he says he's doing something good, that he doesn't change. And we know he did change it. He said we're going to be in Egypt for 400 years and we were only there 210. So he did change.
I almost meant it the other way. If they had free knowledge of what the Torah was going to be, and they have to live through all those things, they, in a sense, could have changed the script. Right. But they lived their lives.
You're talking about the Jewish people that were living in Egypt. It's a very interesting point. Not necessarily did they know events that are going to happen. They knew the laws that they had to keep from the Torah. Not necessarily did even Avraham he knew that the Jewish people are going to have a hard time. He saw the future of the exile, but he didn't necessarily know that there's going to be a splitting of the sea. But he knew that you have to put on tefillin and keep kosher, and he actually didn't have tefillin. He just did some other thing representing the concept. So but that's an interesting discussion to see exactly what they knew. If they knew, if they knew everything, mainly it says they knew the laws. They kept the whole Torah. Did God give them all the insides of what's going to happen with the 10 plagues and all that? Possibly not. That's what I would say.
God knew, obviously, that the temple would be destroyed and it would be exiled. Otherwise, that wasn't prevented from happening. So that was meant to happen.
No, it could still be, like in anything, because we don't understand God's mind, meaning he thinks things and they could, he knows the future, but at the same time, he could change the future, even though he knows the future, because that's something that's beyond our understanding. So even though he knew the temples are going to be destroyed, our behavior could have changed that. So, yeah.
But if our behavior changed that, it wouldn't be the Judaism that we know today. You wouldn't have had Rashi and Maimonides.
True.
And all that happened in Spain. So it's a very interesting thing when you think about it.
There's a very long Hasidic discourse of the second Lubavitcher Rebbe about the concept of free choice. Fascinating, long discussion on next week's Torah portion, because it speaks about God destroying the city of Sodom and everything. But it's an interesting discussion concept.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
All right, Steve. Have a good evening.
Take care.
Regards. I'll see you.